Okay. So we're talking about how can we help preserve the world's coral reefs. Alright, so on my research, I just defining the problem. I found that the coral reefs are being bleached because of high temps of the water and the sunlight, and it's really bad when the summers or the heat is record high. In 1998 is the first time when the shallow water reefs died. Estimated 16% of them did, and it was the hottest recorded year until 2010, when those numbers were pretty much matched. And then another thing defining the problem would be the El Nino, when there's El Ninos that causes them.
I have a more focused area on where coral bleach is happening, and it's mainly on the Great Barrier Reef, right off the coast of Australia. There's about 50% mortality in the northern tip of the Great Barrier Reef due to coral bleaching. And basically what coral bleaching is, it's the process of when warm water in the ocean stresses the coral to the point where they expel tiny algae. These algae are known as zooxanthellae, and then that normally lives inside their tissue. The algae provides the coral with most of their food as well as their color. If the heat stress is lessened soon enough, the coral can recover. If not, the organisms will die.
And I also found that on the bright side, it seems that even though we've had warmer temperatures in certain areas with coral reefs since the 1980s, as of earlier this year, the trend has subsided slightly. So that is some good news. And then also, when you addressed its sunlight, its higher temperatures, it can be lower temperatures, variations in currents, and then also the insertion of chemicals, sediment, all those kind of things that are affected by humans. So
yeah, I have that the anthropogenic stressors.
I also have about 12% of the world's barrier reefs, so in the entire world, they've all been bleached. Most of this is due to El Nino and climate change. So those are the main factors.
I also found a research paper. It was a Smithsonian Library's article or journal, and it talked about specifically causes from damages by locally damaged things and also globally damaged. And locally, I found that it's pollution and nutrients and sedimentation from poor land use and fishing and mining. And then globally is the greenhouse gases that are raising the temperatures and acidifying the oceans.
And whenever those local issues occur, it's the ocean, so it travels.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really a widespread problem, because you have areas where there's very little pollution, but it still contaminates the water. And then also I found that one issue has been identified, it's overfishing, and that happens specifically with herbivorous fish. And what happens is then there becomes more weedy plants, like the seaweed, those sort of aquatic plants, and they'll take over more square footage than would coral reefs. So there's not enough space. And then there's the unnatural minerals, which are also harmful to all types of aquatic life. There's the possibility that a lot of areas could adapt to the warmer waters, and in many cases there's been migration of certain fish and species to different areas, but the fluctuation is oftentimes too high.
It's also, I got fishermen are a big cause of it too, because like when they're going to get these corals or just like going like scuba diving and stuff like that to view them, like sometimes they'll drop the anchors on the coral reefs, which damages them, it causes them to die, and also explosions in the water. They do those. They used to do them. I forget. I don't know exactly why, but those cause them to die too.
Back to what you said about the greenhouse gases. I got this from National Geographic. They said the emission of fossil fuels increases the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air, and more of this is dissolving into the ocean. This lowers the pH of the water, making it more acidic, which makes it harder for the reef to build itself back up to construct their hard skeletons.
So I have today bleaching is at an all-time high. El Nino is one of the biggest factors, I think. It takes 1 degree Celsius change in the water temperature for a coral to become bleached, and El Nino raises it by 2 degrees Celsius, so that causes a lot of coral to become bleached. But just because it's bleached doesn't mean that it's dead. You could still recover from bleaching. You just need a solution to that.
There's some places where it's possible for the coral to grow again, but then there's the permanently damaged where it's been several years of bleaching, so certain areas will not recover.
I was on time.com and they were talking about a reef off of the coast of Belize, and they said that they were able to recover the reef, and because they turned it into a no fishing zone and they took care of it and it recovered from bleaching. So
that could lead into a possible solution.
It could. It could lead into a possible solution. Should we, did we discuss our criteria a little bit?
No.
We should get to the criteria.
Alright, so, well, focusing on we can't really do anything about the temperature, so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, low cost, like efficient, because there's like I have like a already like done solution that was like engineering and stuff, and it could be really like high price.
Yeah, so cost efficient solutions for specifically more underdeveloped places.
Yeah.
Cost efficient.
Because some of these
For what?
underdeveloped
Like
areas,
more underdeveloped.
they rely on the
countries.
coral reef for.
And there's a lot of places, especially
yes,
economic
a lot of places
prosperity.
rely on coral reef for food too.
and like South Pacific, there's a lot of issues.
It also brings in
Overfishing.
a lot of tourism to the area, which helps boost the economy in those low areas.
I saw, the death of the reefs could cost the economy to lose
We need something that's
375
cost
billion.
efficient. We need something that helps like the animals and the ecosystem in the area.
Okay, so,
Well, worldwide initiatives for pollution. Furthering of international marine organizations. There's a lot that have formed since the realization of bleaching, especially since the 1990s. Like there's, for example, one called CARICOMP, which is this was founded in the Caribbean, and it works to spread awareness, not necessarily fix the problem. So I guess more in-depth approaches, something that actually targets the problem and doesn't just raise awareness, because that's really not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, definitely it's going to target the problem.
Well, I mean, raising awareness can help. I mean,
It can.
if you can promote health, safe like fishing, that would help, because a lot of people don't actually know that this is going on.
And there's also like safety and scuba diving methods and stuff like that.
I think we want something that can address every
So
possible
the fish,
cause.
the fishermen, the scuba divers, the economy, the ecosystems, make it cost efficient.
A lot of people take more coral than they actually need, so they
People-
waste it.
save that for the solutions.
Okay, so we have cost efficient, eco-friendly for all the organisms. Targets the problem rather than just raising awareness, and addressing every possible cause, especially the human activity.
Sounds good.
Good?
Yeah.
Alright. So then, possible solutions.
This is the best part. This is exciting.
Okay. Well, like, I found a bunch that, like, have already kind of been done. Something I found a lot of was, ex-situ conservation, and I define that as removing the coral from the natural habitat and managing them in a controlled environment. We can do this by having modern advances in cryobiology, which is the biology of the properties of organisms and tissues at low temperatures, and genome banking, which is secure long-term storage of an individual's genetic material. This also related with ecological recovery that I found, which would be reestablishing the living components of the reef first, and then allowing the reef accretion to proceed subsequently, rather than trying to rehabilitate the lost physical reef structure through engineering and restoration projects that cost a lot more money and a lot more resources. There's coral gardening that goes along with that, and I actually have like a picture defining that, and it's like it was defined in an article that I looked at as taking samples of the coral fragments and placing them in nurseries, and then taking those nursery grown corals and replacing them onto dying reefs. So it's focusing more on the dying reefs than a lot of people focus on the healthy reefs, trying to like maintain them rather than focusing on the ones that are already dying. And this is better than other solutions because you don't need to take samples from other corals, which other solutions try and do, and it's at the nursery there's high productivity, and it's a lot lower cost than engineering of the coral reefs, and it's like you only need like simple technology.
Yeah.
So I thought that one was.
I like that because you're not like going into these reefs that are healthy and taking coral out of it. You're just trying to fix ones that are already damaged. So that's good. Yeah. I had this thing in 1998. Bill Clinton created this coral reef task force, with CRTF as it's known for, and they work with the NOAA. I don't know if you guys read about that, but that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and they all work together, and they like take samples from like the temperature of the air, temperature of the water, the waves and stuff like this, and they try to find like everything that could possibly affect coral reefs, not just like what humans do, but natural occurrences. And so I'm pretty sure that they have helped other coral reefs flourish. So that's a good thing that's going on right now.
We should start writing our solutions.
I don't know what.
Well, we don't necessarily need to.
I mean, I have like a couple here.
Okay.
We'll talk about it first.
Alright.
Go on.
Alright, so like some scientists are breeding coral reefs in facilities and are trying to figure out which ones can sustain higher water temperatures and higher acidity in the water. And then once they've been perfected, they could be planted with other coral reefs, and then eventually like they will crossbreed, and the product should be coral that have increased sustainability in these environments. They plant these by using giant like either concrete balls or coral, and then they cover it with like coral, and they put it with the other coral. Scientists also came up with this steel cage called the Lotus, which had electrical currents in it. These currents triggered a chemical reaction which draws out calcium carbonate out of a solution in the water, and it gets deposited on the cage structure. Corals find this irresistible and multiply around it, causing mass production of corals. So if we use something like that in big areas where there's a lot of coral reef, we could definitely generate a lot more coral reproduction and coral production overall. Which is something to get back to.
And almost all of these sources, there's almost always the mentioning of the fact that nature almost always can adapt to changing weather by humans or by natural weather patterns. So there's a lot of hope for those sort of methods where you insert new coral into places that have experienced a lot of bleaching. I also read about, which you had talked about to me before, the crown of thorns starfish. In the Great Barrier Reef, there was a huge overpopulation, and this was identified by the Australian Institute of Marine Science, and that's another organization that has been able to, at least to some extent, help the problem. I read about the increased runoff and the sediment from the 19th to 20th centuries. And it's also important to mention that, it's not a recent problem. We've been contributing pollution to our climate since the late 18th century. So with all of this data that we've actually been able to collect for a fair amount of time, there's something referred to as meta-analysis, which is bringing together a lot of inconsistencies in research and making them more synthesized. And one solution to that, though, is to go more in depth with our data and not, overgeneralize everything, because there's lots of different coral reef structures throughout the world. And they're not all the same.
Well, going back to those crown of thorns starfish, I mean, I read that they do affect coral reefs, and they feed on fast growing coral. But at the same time, I also read that they can be good for healthy coral reefs, because they're feeding on these fast growing corals, and which gives slow growing corals time to grow, and they form colonies. So at the same time, it's good. So I know they try to remove them from the ecosystems, but is that a good idea, or should you leave them? I don't know what we should do about that, because that is also an effect of why some of these coral reefs are dying.
Is the starfish themselves?
Yeah, they hover, they stick onto these corals and they eat them. But I forget what I was gonna say now. I forget.
Okay, so I have that. Another one I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Oh no, I don't know.
I mean, just to go on top of that, the starfish, what happens is they prey on what you said, the fast growing coral, and then it's closely related to runoff from polluted rivers. The pollution comes from chemicals used to fertilize crops that are washing the rivers after big rains and then go to the ocean. The pollution from the runoff helps plankton grow in large numbers, and these plankton are perfect food for the young crown of starfish.
I don't think the crown of starfish is that big of a deal, but once every 10 years, I believe, that there's an outbreak of them, and there's just too many, which kills the coral reefs.
Okay. Another thing that I found, which was interesting, is I think that David mentioned the marine protected areas before. I found that we could include the degrading reefs in these marine protected areas rather than just the healthy reefs. It focuses on trying to preserve them and let them rebuild themselves without outside threats. And it would identify areas that had the most promising recovery rates, and rather than replacing just the basic marine protected areas approach, and we would just add on to them, and it could help the natural restoration of reefs, the ecosystem's recovery, and increase the size of implemented protected areas, as well as improving the human communities that depend on the reefs. this would also protect the reefs from endogenous stressors like fishing and habitat destruction. So that would help them recover naturally as well. And focusing on the damaged reef can help restore reefs indefinitely rather than only focusing on the healthy reefs and trying to maintain them.
Yeah. And prevention rather than fixing the problem after the fact is very important as well. And I think that's something that's not always considered. We always try to do things after they've already started, because there's a lot of places at higher altitudes that really haven't been affected by bleaching yet. So we should also focus on that.
I have from Atlantic.com, I found this article about how they're creating these 3D printed coral reefs. I don't know if you guys read about that. But they're creating these fake coral reefs, and they've actually put them into the ocean in the Persian Gulf in 2012, and they put it right next to coral reefs that have died out and all the life, like fishes and everything, have left. And they put it there so that the fish and just all the life in general there can find like a new home, and so that like there still is hope for that coral reef to come back to life. If they leave, there's no chance.
Mm-hmm.
So like going back to what coral reefs do for like the environment and like us, like coral reefs, they can also provide coastal protection from hurricanes and tropical storms. The great biodiversity of coral reefs serves as an important source for new medicinal remedies. So like we could find new types of medicine from coral reefs and like the life that surrounds them. And then coral reefs are also less likely to sexually reproduce when they are under stress, which puts their survival at risk.
Yeah, when they're bleached, they're under stress. Yeah.
So right now I missed the first one you said. What's the first solution you were talking about?
About the 3D printing?
Bill Clinton.
Oh, no, in 1998, Bill Clinton passed this coral reef task force, and they work with the NOAA right now, and they take samples and find out every possible way that a coral reef could be affected. They study them and they figure out what they could do to prevent this. But they study like the natural occurrences rather than what the humans do to affect coral reefs,
Mm-hmm. And then what was the solution you said? Okay.
Well,
I mean, are we brainstorming solutions right now?
I was just writing down all the ones we said, and then we can
What do you have so
brainstorm
far?
off of that. So I have the coral gardening and the ecological recovery, the crown of thorns starfish, addressing that in some way, however that would be, the degraded reefs, marine protected areas, the 3D printed coral reefs, and then the coral reef task force.
Yeah, I have another one. Civil engineer Mo Ihsani, he had an idea that since bleaching is caused by the warm water temperatures and stuff like that, he created this very cost efficient, which goes back to our criteria there. It's a cost efficient machine. It's a pipe. It's not made of metal to save money, obviously, but it could be molded when it's being made into different sizes. And what it does is you put this pipe, drop it in the ocean. It's attached to like this generator kind of thing. And the generator gets energy from the waves that are at the surface, and they go down and produce energy, and the energy produces cold water, and they go through the pipe and right to the coral reef, so that cold water is constantly flowing through the coral reefs to give them life again, and so that they don't have.
That's a really good idea.
Warm water, yeah.
Okay.
Is there a cost structure?
Yeah, is there how much it costs?
I didn't get the cost on it, but they said that it is very cost efficient machine, and it's very affordable. It's not going to be a lot of money to put it in, which is why it's such a good idea.
So do you have another one that you researched?
I have a few more. Does everyone have more? Or?
Nah,
Okay. I have a couple.
I have one more.
And this first one addresses the cost efficiency, the need to find the funds to help the coral reefs. There's been an initiative in Mexico, as well as some other more underdeveloped countries in Central America, to insure the reefs. There's companies along the coast, for example, like tourism industries, hotels. They're buying into insurance policies that they insure the reefs themselves. Organizations here, they already provided protection policies for issues caused by climate disruptions, whether by climate change or not. Usually what happens in these policies is that the holders will receive, after they pay premiums from $1 to $7 million, they'll end up getting payouts of up to $75 million based off of criteria like rainfall, wave height, things like that, that can affect the shore ultimately. There's also a solution referred to as seawalls, which would be concrete structures in the water. Of course, that's bad for tourism because no one wants to go snorkeling on a seawall that's constructed of concrete, and it doesn't last. Nature has its way of making its ecosystems last, but man-made structures don't last forever. And then back to this insurance policy, here's a quote: "Because you're assigning a value to the reef, you know the various scenarios in which that reef can fail, and you know you have a whole cast of stakeholders contributing to its future protection." And we always talk about who are the stakeholders in the issue, and they could be things like tourism industries and people who rely on those areas for food, and then that goes back to the overfishing.
Well, besides all that, I mean, there's things that we should be doing daily. I know we say it over and over, but like reduce, reuse, recycle, not burning oil and coal and gas for fuel that heats up the air. Finding better ways to just produce energy and burn these resources as little as possible. Keeping electricity and auto use at home to a minimum. Disposing of your garbage properly, and just things you could do in everyday activities, not just to save coral reefs, but I mean it affects many other things as well. So we should really promote that.
Mm-hmm.
The last solution that I found online was one more. It was like a law that the U.S. could have. They already have something. It's called. It would be extending upon the Tropical Forest Conservation Act. It says that it would say that every dollar that other certain qualified nations spend on preserving the reefs would lessen their debt to the U.S. by $1. It would help make the nations friendly as well as helping the environment. It would be 12 nations, and it would be called Debt for Nature Swaps. In the past, this has helped. Over 7 years, these swaps generated $135 million of debt relief while conserving about 50 million acres of tropical forest. So that could help a lot with coral reefs.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be something we could do, and that would be more of like a policy.
And
outlook.
So who did you say came up with that idea?
I don't know exactly. I got it from.
And that's like a solid idea, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really
Science
solid
Direct.
idea.
As long as both countries are down for that.
Science Direct Act. Well, it's already a thing for tropical forests.
Uh-huh.
It would just be
You
adding
could just
on
have
to
to
it
add in
about coral reefs.
Yeah. It's not bad. I like that idea.
Yeah, I got it from Science Direct on human and coral reef.
Got a couple things from Science Direct. It's helpful. So I have several more solutions, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, but I also think then we should discuss
After that.
our own solutions too.
Yeah, start brainstorming.
One of them, we've talked about nurseries before. Seagrass is very important to marine life. There's evidence that suggests that from extraction of the ear bone in certain fish, it identifies that at least, in the first several months of the fish's life, it travels through beds of seagrass, or it lives there for a period of time. So cultivating seagrass that could go alongside the reefs could also be a solution, and that is very cost efficient. So that can increase the native fish population and support further growth of coral reefs with more species there. I also found that, let's see, I guess one more effective, practical solution, there's been a lot of efforts to genetically modify things that are in the ocean, coral reefs as well as other species. But with this, there's a super algae, it's called. These are, so we could utilize genetically engineered microalgae to aid corals in tolerance to stress from changing temperatures. What happens is these living particles create food for the coral, and what we can do is utilize a lot of different types of this microalgae they all have different types of temperature tolerances, and introducing that to warmer waters so that certain types of coral could tolerate the temperature fluctuations. But this is still in preliminary stages, so it's only a possibility.
Okay. So, you guys still be in it?
Should we skirt on those?
Yeah. A little bit.
Skirt.
Oh. Okay. So, solutions going off of those kind of, but also
You should put some of those solutions up there too. Just get all the solutions up there.
so coral gardening or just focusing
Coral
on
gardening,
the ecological recovery rather than engineering.
Crown of thorns, starfish. You want me to read this list?
Yeah, okay, so then the what?
Crown of thorns, starfish.
Okay, so
Yeah, the 3D printed reefs. Coral Reef Task Force.
coral reef.
The machine with the pipe. Insurance companies insuring the reefs and such. Yeah, seawalls, concrete structures, and better ways to reduce energy, limiting pollution.
Okay.
Oh, and I think I also forgot to mention, with the seawalls, the objective was to lower the wave height, so it would prevent more impactful storms, because the coral reefs aid in keeping storms to a minimum.
Okay, so any other ones kind of building off those? Any more ideas? I don't know. Something.
Well, I don't know. Personally, I think, I don't know if it's like going to be very effective, but like you definitely should, like, let people know what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, like before this, like I never even like
Yeah.
I never even knew this was this big of a problem. And
It's
coral
better to
reefs,
get the word, better informed people.
coral reefs in some countries are like, that's like their everything. They rely on coral reefs and stuff like that.
So raising awareness, which could technically go more into our criteria.
Mm-hmm.
But under,
Let's address that criteria.
well, I think we should list some more.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Maybe so like on our criteria, we have eco-friendly for all the organisms. How could we do that? What's a way we could, well that could be like, maybe raising barriers for human activity. That could also go into the marine protected areas, but.
Yeah, we can make, for a solution, we can make a law like you can't take any part of the coral reef at all. I'm not sure how you would enforce that, but like,
I know.
because I know some people that like take parts or like more than they actually need, and it actually hurts the coral reef a lot.
Well, I know if you don't. I don't know if you need a license to take coral.
Do you?
Probably,
Yeah.
but like I know it's illegal to go to like a coral reef and just take a piece of coral.
Yeah.
Like, that's illegal.
Maybe like somehow we could figure out how to better.
Enforce that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also policies that prevent overfishing by alternating the areas where fishermen can
Yeah.
collect food.
Okay, so like barriers for human activity, which are the threats.
Like overfishing, unsafe scuba diving techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know a lot of people pay for tours of coral reefs. That's a big income thing for them. Practicing just safe scuba diving.
So, address every possible cause, especially human activity. What other causes we have? We have the actual temperature of the waters. We have human activity. We have
just natural
starfish.
occurrences in general.
Even though it's crazy, but like we can find some way to like regulate the temperature of the ocean in that area.
So regulate.
I think that's nearly impossible.
Ocean. No judgment.
Well, I mean, regulate or trying to change the temperature in that area is exactly what that machine's trying to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
So it's not a crazy idea.
So, the whole ocean. So that's.
Okay. I think we have a
Well,
solid list. Do you have any
yeah.
more?
No. I think we should.
This.
Evaluate.
The genetic modification could be one.
Yeah, I like that one. That's a good one.
Oh, I also read this thing. It was like they wanted to study the coral, obviously, but they inject the corals with something to make them be able to like withstand like warmer waters. You know, not die when the water gets
So
warm.
find like a.
So they're like researching.
Find
it.
something to help the coral adapt better. I don't know. Inject the coral genetically. It's kind of like genetic
You're
modification.
Yeah, and that's
modifying it.
important because that's more preventing the problem from happening than just
Yeah.
raising
So,
awareness.
injecting coral. Alright. So, looking at we could just go through.
You want to just go down the list, start evaluating them?
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
so positives of the coral gardening, ecological recovery, would be the fact that you don't have to take parts of other reefs that could be possibly dying.
Yeah.
So that would be eco-friendly as well as cost-efficient because it's a controlled space.
Yeah. Any downfalls for that one?
Overall, it's not. You need a certain amount of space.
You
It
need
takes
to
a lot of
be-
time.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
really
It definitely takes time to
time-consuming.
grow the coral to
I mean, it can be
a decent amount of
20
size where you
years
could
for a certain
insert it
species,
back
so-
into the environment.
Okay. So.
But also, like that solution could probably link to the genetic modification.
We have a lot that could link to each other.
Yeah.
So we have positives and negatives for the designated or the degrading reefs, marine protected areas.
What do you mean?
The only thing that does is it doesn't it doesn't like take into account the human activity because like then like people like tourists can't like come see it or whatever.
Yeah, but at the same time it does on the good hand side because it's taking away from people fishing in that area and it's protecting them.
True.
But it also doesn't protect against the changing currents and the pollution in other areas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's not focusing on natural things. Okay. So more downfalls. The crown of thorns starfish. That's like something we can address, but it's not something that I feel like
they're like creatures, you know, they're like in the ecosystem. There's not, we really can't like go around like killing them or anything. Like,
it's almost impossible to micromanage.
The only way
that's not like the biggest factor that we need to be worried about.
Yeah.
I mean, there's fluctuations.
So there's ways to address it, but there's
I mean,
it's more of a.
I think the only way is to like just maintain the reefs, you know.
Yeah,
just
definitely. So we could get
there's no like actual solution to that.
Okay, so that one. Alright, so the 3D printed reefs. The only thing I didn't understand about that one is the actual would organisms start building feeding off of it somehow or
that's the problem.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like very
because that's
unnatural.
it's providing a home for them, but that's not all.
I feel like there's not enough research with that.
Also
to tell what
dangerous
it'll do
because species will still try to eat the.
Yeah, eat the 3D printed reefs.
So what did you find in the research?
There wasn't like that big of an article on it. I'll get back to you on that. Hold on.
Side.
Okay, so the coral. We'll skip over that one for a sec. We'll go to the insurance companies.
So
that I'm not understanding that.
Yeah, I'm not getting that. Need some clarification on that one.
Okay. So basically what it does is so stakeholders in these insurance plans realize the consequences of dwindling reef ecosystems. Tourism relies on maintaining not only optically appealing structures but also the protection that these structures provide. Around 97% of wave energy is eliminated when passing over coastal reefs, so that has huge impacts on the shores themselves. But this is a way basically to collect money for protecting the reefs because there's a lot of problems with, for example, charities and then those task force organizations in getting enough money to actually prevent the problem and not just raise awareness. So this is something that's more physical because these towns or these resorts in general rely on it. There are downfalls to it though. Number one being for a lot of local populations, explaining to them that you have to regulate the waters is difficult because a lot of them rely on local fishing, on local tourism. So there's a lot of those things, not necessarily just with the insuring though.
I feel like that's like a good idea, but like at the same time with this, it's focusing more on gaining money to help preserve them, and I think we should focus more on actually preserving them. And then once we figure out that, when we're actually implementing the solution, we figure out how we're getting the money.
Create an actual task force, and that task force implements our solution, which would be to do whatever we're going to do.
So with that, it would definitely be cost efficient, but it doesn't necessarily allocate the funds where they need to be.
Yeah, and it's not really focusing on actually doing something about it. It's just focusing more on raising awareness.
Yeah. I think a coral reef task force in that can go.
Okay.
I think the pipe.
Yeah, so
that's a great idea.
The machine pipe, which Frank talked about.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I feel like though that's a temporary solution to an ongoing problem.
Yeah, I
but it rebuilds the reefs, you know.
Yeah.
I know it's temporary, but I mean from there you can figure out other solutions, you know. But 30 in the bleaching stage, I don't think
Yeah.
you have that much time to act. You just kind of
That'll definitely be like right then and there. Like that'll definitely.
I
help the
think
reefs
it's more
out.
temporary.
Yeah.
But there are like positives to it too.
We also don't want a bunch of machines in the ocean. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a lot of maintenance, and I feel like even though that it might not cost relatively a lot to implement it, keeping
You
keeping
probably
them
need
going.
a lot of
Yeah.
them too.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
a lot.
it seems like it
What
would
do
be
you
a
mean?
huge investment.
Like
It's
a
a-
lot.
How many-
per reef. I mean, it depends. Like per reef, there's one.
Just one.
It's
Yeah, because
How big is it?
I
Okay,
remember
not
when
to stress, but we have to hurry.
Oh,
Okay, so wait, so we'll leave that one up there. There's still positives, but so the seawalls with that, it's more of like
it's a temporary fix, and
fix.
it kind of eliminates the idea of even trying to save the coral reefs.
yeah.
Mhm.
I don't-
That's
it's
a problem.
temporary, but
And it's not
it does have
eco-friendly.
positives too, like lowering
does.
the
Yeah.
wave height.
And it's cost efficient.
Okay, so
You could definitely do.
I
away
think
with that one.
these two, the better ways to reduce energy and raising awareness, are more so something to like. It's not anything you can actually do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we need to
They're
figure out something to do.
They're more generalized for the overall issue of climate
Yeah.
change.
Okay, so we need something that's actually going to target the problem, like we have on our criteria. Like a policy or a law enforcing the not taking coral reefs, and this could also go with the policy I said talked about with going off of the Tropical Forest Conservation Act. So like we could bring the law
Overall,
into it.
the law is a good idea. It's just like, what are we gonna have? Police and scuba diving gear
Yeah.
under there? Like, it's gonna be really hard to enforce.
Yeah, it is really hard. It
It would be almost impossible. The Great Barrier
and
Reef,
it wouldn't be
all the
very
reefs
cost
are
efficient.
humongous. Yeah, it would. If we had to pay policemen to be in scuba diving gear to
Yeah.
keep the water,
It's not really addressing too much of our
and it's I
criteria.
don't think that's eco-friendly either.
Yeah. So then the barriers for human activity, which could also go with the degraded reefs, marine protected areas. That would be a barrier for where fishing, and I think that even the marine protected areas, that's still blocking tourism too.
Yeah.
Okay. Regulate the ocean temperature, which
Well, that in a way goes with the machines, but that seems virtually impossible unless we address the overall issue.
regulate them in certain areas, because that could help, but it's just not very time friendly. Genetic modification, which we said would go
Yeah,
into
we'd
coral
definitely go
gardening,
with coral gardening.
and
That seems like probably, well, to me at least, probably the most effective
Yeah.
thing as of right now. With you're probably not going to change temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably not going to be able to immediately change the problem, so you may as well address it.
Alright, back to 3D reefs. I got it.
Okay.
Alright, so it's not only for just like keeping the different species of fish around the area. It's because there's coral release this thing called polyps or whatever, and those are that's like how more coral forms, and when they release their polyps, it goes to the surface of the ocean, and they're attracted to I forget exactly what they're attracted to, right? But they're attracted to something, and the point of these 3D reefs is to attract these polyps so that as long as the fish are there, but it attracts the polyps, so that the polyps attach to these 3D reefs and they multiply from
And
there. So it's creating more reefs, more live
And
reefs.
supply
Yeah.
So that's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay, so that could work. Okay, now go and then injecting coral.
That's like that goes along with like genetic
It's
modification. You
okay.
could group those together.
So it'd be those three. Okay, so then going back, we can focus on like rating them, which we can pick. Right, so the coral gardening and the genetic modification and injecting coral would all be together. And then we have the 3D printers and the degraded reef, marine marine protected areas, is that like the top 3 we're getting at?
So like, I think the coral gardening, that's a really good one. The marine protected area, that doesn't take into account like if you're gonna protect a certain area, that's gonna take away from like the economy in that area.
Yeah, but it also addresses the human activity and also targeting the problem. But we could focus if it seems like we're focusing more on the actual ecological recovery aspect. And then the 3D printed reefs. Okay. So that's it.
Oh my God,
Okay.
it's beautiful.
What? So we have the drivers. We can do the force analysis. Drivers and the restrictions of the coral gardening and all this stuff. Okay. So, our criteria with the coral gardening, would that be cost efficient?
I'd say, I don't know if it would fully be cost efficient because you need a laboratory, you gotta do hire
On a large scale,
people for research.
It's definitely not
large
cost
scale. It's
efficient.
definitely not cost efficient.
Or very time consuming too.
Drivers.
Definitely takes time.
Okay. Time consuming.
Drivers it's completely eco-friendly.
Yeah, it is
Its
completely
goal is to help the environment.
Another restriction would be it's not really focusing on human activity or any of those.
Yeah, it doesn't
It's
stop.
just-
It doesn't
it's
stop
just
Just
human
adjusting to the human activity. But
But
it does address
does
every
help.
possible cause.
It does help the economy too, because it's not taking anything away from it, just adding.
Okay. Any other drivers? Let's see. It's directly targeting the problem.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
directly targets the problem.
Okay, so directly targeting the problem. And then, is there anything else that stands out for the drivers and restrictions for the ecological recovery and the genetic modifying?
It seems practical.
Yeah.
It's actually practical. It's something that has been
It's not
started.
just. It's not just words.
Mm-hmm.
It means something.
Okay. And then the drivers and restrictions of the 3D printers. That would be. I don't think that would be cost efficient very either.
No.
I mean, that's a lot of 3D printers you're gonna need.
You're not.
And they're gonna have
Think
to be
about it
big.
like this.
That's gonna
you're,
take a lot.
You're not. First of all, 3D printing itself is not like extremely expensive.
No. But the
And
machine itself is.
And
though.
you're not recreating a reef. You're just putting like blocks, like kind of like you're not like literally recreating a reef. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't think it's.
It is eco-friendly though.
It's equal.
No?
In a way.
It could be. It could not be. Like we don't know. Like what happens if like a fish like eats part of it or something. Like
No. So
Depends
we're
on
not sure.
decay. Yeah.
yeah, and like how what the water's gonna do. Like if it has like a certain color, like if like the dye's gonna like wash off or something like that.
So
Like,
do you
I don't
think
know.
that we even know enough about the 3D printers to be able to make a decision off of it?
Probably not. That's why I like the coral gardening.
Yeah.
Plus I'm a good gardener.
Is there, so let's see, going off of our criteria, we're not sure if it's eco-friendly, we're not sure if it's cost efficient, we're not even sure if it targets the problem because we don't know if it actually works, and it's not addressing human activity or anything like that.
Yeah, we definitely don't know that much about it to make
So we
an
would,
informed decision.
And what's the point of 3D printing if you can just use things that are metal or it doesn't
Yeah, he's right.
necessarily
You use a
make
concrete
yeah,
stuff
you're not
that's
sure
more
if it
cost
actually has
efficient.
benefits over other things. So I think that we would.
And in coral gardening, you use some of those things too, anyways, to implement it.
Okay, so another thing, so then rating these. I'm not. Okay, so rating the drivers. How much? So eco-friendly.
It's
we'll
definitely
go 1 to
completely
10.
eco-friendly. That's definitely 10.
All right, so 10. That's really important to us. It's helping the economy.
I'd say 10.
10, yeah.
10.
Solid.
Okay.
Targeting problems 10.
That's
Yeah, it's a 10.
That's like a line.
Let's go with 8.
Yeah,
And then
eight
it's
for
practical.
Practical, yeah,
Let's
it's
see, 'cause
not
there's other practical
huge,
decisions
yeah.
that we can make. I just keep popping. Okay, and then the restrictions that it's not cost efficient. It probably costs a lot of money.
That's probably a 10.
It's time consuming. I don't think that's much
Not
of a problem.
I think that's like a 7.
Yeah. Okay. And then it's not addressing human activity. I think that's really important.
I think that's really important. Yeah.
Maybe like a 10
I
or
mean,
like a
definitely
9.
not a
Let's
10.
go with 9.
No,
I like 9.
Okay. So 19. Okay, so
This is very good.
Hey.
We're doing it.
It's like we got a winner.
Alright, so we chose to
Hopefully
use
we're not doing
coral
cultivation
gardening
bias, though.
in ecological recovery by using genetic
Yes.
material.
We did it. We did it. We solved
Back to
the
you,
world's
Greg.
problems. Congratulations.
You heard it here first. We're saving the coral reefs.
Yeah.